Well, this week we've been talking about the issue of slavery, and as I said in the beginning, that it has a direct application to us in the sense that it really does describe how an employee and an employer should have their relationship. And like marriage or like parenting, there's a reciprocal dynamic that each has a responsibility to the other. And this is a uniquely Christian concept, that if you're over somebody, you have a responsibility to treat them in a certain loving and caring way. And if you're underneath somebody else's authority, you have a responsibility to treat them with respect and obedience. And so the concept has really direct application to what you and I might go through in the marketplace. But in the immediate situation of Paul's world, he was dealing with literal slavery. And as we pointed out over the last couple of days, he wasn't encouraging people to stay in slavery. 1 Corinthians 7 said, if you can get out of it, get out of it. But if you can't, then be a good witness for Christ and trust God for your situation, that God would find a way for you to be free. It's interesting because in the Roman world that Paul lived in, that some of the highest positioned people in the Roman Empire were actually slaves. Many of them were highly educated Greeks who found themselves in high positions with the emperor, but they were slaves. And a lot of people were granted their freedom out of slavery and given citizenship and became high status individuals later on because of their ability. So, it's our concept of slavery and the antebellum South and all that stuff is really unique to our culture in that sense. It was a very different dynamic that existed in the ancient world. Not that it didn't have immense cruelty. Most of the gladiators were slaves. And basically they're sent in there to fight wild animals and each other to the death. Well, there was a brutality and cruelty that you and I can't even imagine. But the one thing we see historically, if we're honest, is that Christianity is what began to destroy the concept of slavery. And it's interesting because in parts of the world where Christianity is banned, like the Islamic world, the Marxist world, slavery still exists. So anyway, having said that, in verse 5 again, Paul says, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect, with respect and fear. The fear there is the word phobos in the Greek, and we often translate it or think in our mind that we're talking about respect and terror. No, that actually means profound respect. It means to treat somebody with the respect that they're due, honor to whom honor is due. And he says, do it with sincerity of the heart, just as you would obey Christ. And then he goes on, obey them not only to win their favor when their eyes are on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. One time I was having a lunch at an airport between flights, and I remember as I was sitting there, I was watching this young man who was waiting on tables, or basically bussing tables, and I observed him over a while. Became very interesting because I found that when the manager of the restaurant would go behind the door into the kitchen, he stopped working. In fact, he would just stand there looking at the door, and as soon as she came out the door, then he started washing the tables again. And I watched this for about 30 minutes, and it was quite entertaining because in a way I felt like he's working harder not to work than he would be if he were just doing work. And the bottom line was that he only responded or only put in effort when he was being watched. And this is really the very thing that Paul was talking about, because in the Roman world where slavery was really common, this was a common problem. This is why they had slave masters who would be there to enforce the work of the people, watching them and even beating them and whatever, in order to keep them working, because these people weren't getting anything out of it. They had nothing to gain. It reminded me of the conversation I had with some of my friends in the former Soviet Union, and they used to say about the communists, they said, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. And it was the same idea that they had no freedom in their job. They didn't get to choose their job. They didn't get to choose their hours. And they certainly didn't get rewarded if they did more. In fact, many people would suffer from the other employees if they did more because I remember I was working in a factory when I was in my early 20s, first in ministry, and I took any job I could get to help support us as we were starting to the first steps into ministry. But aside from my own personal story, and I remember one day, every job I had this idea, whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. So I went and I just worked my tail off, trying to be the best employee I could. And I had some of the employees come to me at break and say, slow it down, you're making the rest of us look bad. And I remember the first time I was confronted with the idea that being a diligent worker wasn't favored by many of these union employees who really wanted to keep the pace and the productive low so that they could just kind of slog through the day without a great deal of effort. It's a concept that I was not raised with, a concept that was very foreign to me, but it's really the same concept that Paul is talking about here. He's saying you're in this situation and you're not serving Christ from your heart. That's why he says, obey them not only when their eye is on you, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. And that's where God loves a willing sacrifice, doesn't he? That's what he said in 2 Corinthians 8, where he said, God loves a cheerful giver. He loves one who gives out of the abundance of heart, not by constraint, but willingly. And the whole idea is that our service to God is to be in that manner. And what we lose and have lost somewhat is something the Puritans had a really good grasp on, is the idea that all work is sacred work. That anything you do should be done unto the Lord, making what you do a sacred effort. So, if you're a mechanic, if you're a builder, you're a chef or a busboy, whatever the job description you have, he says, do it with all of your heart. Well, when I was preparing for ministry and I was doing all these different jobs, that's exactly what I did. And the consequence was every place I worked tried to hire me full time. And it was tough because we could have used more money. But the point was that they saw my work ethic and they said it would be a benefit to have somebody who works that hard working for us. And that's exactly the concept that Paul is talking about here. And it's part of the advice I give to young people. Today, so many people want to graduate from high school or college. They want to get a corner office working for Microsoft, $100,000, $150,000 a year, and have a view of the campus as they sit there playing video games all day long. Now, I know it's a terrible, horrible characterization. That's not really true. In fact, I find most millennials work really, really hard, but they want immediate reward. And it just doesn't work that way. I've told my kids over and over again, you'll never get paid what you're worth until you're 40. So you're going to be underpaid probably most of your life until you get to that place where you have enough life experience under your belt. See, skill, talent, intellect are great things, but it's life experience that makes those things maximal in what you do. And I've seen that in ministry as well, that people just have to go through a lot of experiences before they become really knowledgeable and informed. Some things that you think are quite simple and easy and you become impatient with other people are things that once they're on your shoulders, you find out that they are pretty heavy, intense burdens to be borne. So, saying all of that, it pays off in whatever you do. To do things with all of your heart, do them as if you're doing it unto the Lord. And I recognize that we are not capable of doing things perfectly. And we have limits, each of us, in what our skill level is, so that there's some people who do stuff like this a lot better than I do. But the whole point is, and this may be disappointing to you, but when I share these things with you, I'm doing the best I can. This is really, I apologize. I wish it was better. But the whole point is, I'm doing the best I can, and that's what God wants. He wants us not putting half efforts or just going through the motions, but whatever is put in front of us, we do it with all of our heart. We do it right. One of the best lessons I ever learned from my wife was the importance of finishing the things I started. I'm like a lot of people. You get started, you're excited about something, and after a while it becomes hard. I tell people the difference between play and work is when you're playing, you may be sweating and toiling, but you can quit anytime you want. Work, you sweat and you toil, and when it stops being fun, you still have to keep on doing it. And there is really the difference between success and failure for many people. Many people are very talented, very enthusiastic, very energetic in the beginning, but when it just really gets hard, when it becomes difficult and even uncomfortable, they want to give it up and go do something else. That's the difference between work and play. And so this is, I hope, helpful stuff, especially if you're younger and you're just trying to build your career. It's important to pray that God put you where you need to be, and the choice of career may not be what seems the most profitable at the moment, but God will bless it if you work hard and do it with all of your heart, and you'll find that God will give you the kind of advancement as the people who are over you will find you trustworthy and reliable. So that's my advice. I'm moving on now. We'll talk tomorrow. God bless you.